Hope you can see that. That's Wild Harmony, Animals of the North by William O. Pruitt, Jr. And this book was given to me quite a few years ago by a friend of mine who lived out in the bush in a couple of buses joined together by a little room. His name was Doug, and he spent much of his time, going out into the bush and cataloging what creatures and what plants were living where and what was critical habitat, and developing a mapping system to determine what was critical habitat. And he was doing this on his own and trying to get people to listen to him so that when areas were logged, they would be logged with wildlife in mind. I'll let him tell you the story of how that went, if he ever wants to do that. But I'm going to read to you from this wonderful, wonderful book that he gave me. It's got a lot of technical talk in it, and it brings the world of the taiga to life in a way that nothing else I've ever read does. It's incredible. Well, I should just start reading. This is chapter 3, The Vole's World. The scar of the great forest fire was still relatively fresh after half a century. Aspens and birches formed a canopy over the burn, while through the deciduous trees young spruces thrust upward. The leafy canopy was thin, with many openings through which the sunlight streamed onto the forest floor. Dead leaves of aspen, birch, and willow formed an irregular carpet, interspersed with patches of brown and green grasses, feathery green horsetails, and the dark, shining green low-bush cranberry leaves. The flexible, woody shoots of high-bush cranberry waved above the forest floor. As the sun moved through the sky, the patches of light and heat flickered over the forest floor. Some parts of the floor were in an almost continuous light, others in continual shade. The light heated and cooled the forest floor in changing patterns. This was the upper world, where the squirrel pursued his three-dimensional life. But below, in the mats of dead and sere leaves under the grassy areas, was a world of tunnels and runways. These runways continued through the litter of deciduous leaves, but were few in the needle litter under the young spruces. I'm going to just show you the picture. This is the vole in its runway. The runway system was constructed and maintained by a population of voles. These mammals were technically known as Microtus oeconomus. Microtus oeconomus. Their official English name of tundra vole was clearly an error because they were as common in the taiga as in the tundra, the taiga being the boreal forest. Voles were inveterate housekeepers. They stored seeds and edible rootlets and were forever cleaning and remaking their runway systems. Thus the old world ekonomka, or housewife, is more apt. Voles were also asocial. That is, they felt no great urge to contact their fellows. They kept to themselves, each to his own system of tunnels and runways that radiated from the nests to all parts of their home ranges. Where adjacent runway systems intermeshed, the territorial boundaries were clearly marked with scent posts. As summer passed into autumn, the birch and aspen leaves turned gold, then faded and clattered down through the branches. The canopy opened, and the sun warmed the forest floor in a brief interlude. Birch leaves speckled the dark green cranberry patches. Their yellow contrasted with the brilliant red berries. The maple-shaped leaves of high-bush cranberry turned to a red and russet backdrop for their clusters of shining berries. Horsetails made a smoky yellow haze over the forest floor. The sparkle of the short, subarctic autumn faded as a chill rain pattered onto the forest floor. The colors dimmed, and the once crisp leaves relaxed and joined their predecessors in the cycle of decay and humus formation. Grass, leaves, and horsetails formed a sopping network over the voles' runways. As the voles foraged and repaired, they shook the vegetation, and a continuous spray settled onto them. A vole would stop short, shake itself violently, and begin to preen its fur. If its fur became soaked and matted, a vole could not produce enough heat to live. Thus the voles whose home ranges did not provide dry nest refuges were obliged to increase their food intake to produce more heat. Some individuals could not do this, and they huddled in their sodden nests. Their foraging trips were feeble. They stumbled along the runways, wheezing and gasping as their lungs choked with cellular exudate. These individuals could not stay alert. A fox took some, a lynx took some, as did a boreal owl. As the nights grew longer, the temperature dipped lower and lower. Crystals of ice formed on the wet leaves. In shaded spots, the ice survived the daylight hours. More crystals formed. They coalesced into sheets and glittering reticula that crackled and tinkled as the voles thrust their way among them. Now the vegetation was completely enmeshed in the ice lattice, and the soil surface itself began to buckle as crystals grew within. Throughout October, the freezing spread deeper, reaching into all crevices and cracks, and even penetrating some nests. Some voles died, for forage they must, yet they dared not experience such heat loss for extended periods. Then came the snow, at first a light dusting that dappled the ground only under the deciduous trees and between the young spruces. This first layer had little effect on the vole's world, since it scarcely altered the heat flow gradient from the earth to the air. But the voles reveled in it. Their tracks quickly made a network. Their runways made tiny trenches and tunnels over and through it. Even when the snow cover thickened, the voles continued to trench it and emerged to scamper over its surface. A series of high-pressure areas moved over the taiga, and the snow increments dwindled. The air temperature fell to well below zero. The snow cover was not thick enough to insulate the earth from the heat sink of the subarctic sky, and the leaf litter froze solidly. Heat flowed upward, sucked from soil, plants, nests, and even voles. On their foraging trips, the voles avoided exposure to the infinite heat sink of the sky, hugging the protective cover of dense, overhanging vegetation. Nonetheless, the metabolic strain was intense, particularly on the older individuals whose fur was ragged and worn thin. Some voles died huddled in their nests, and they soon froze into ice mummies. Then the cold snap weakened. Clouds softened the brittle sky, and snow began to fall. The cover thickened and passed the magical hyemal threshold, insulation sufficient to curtail the deadly sweep of heat from the vole's world. This was the true beginning of winter, and the voles solemnized it by abandoning the snow surface. The network of their trails and trenches filled up and was not renewed. But down below, beneath the snow cover, the voles' activity increased, and the number of their tunnels grew as the heat flow slackened and the sub-snow temperature actually increased, then stabilized at just below freezing. The voles shunned those parts of their home ranges that were cold to their feet. Consequently, they rarely ventured into the snow shadows, or kaminik under the young spruces, where the thin snow cover did not prevent the escape of the earth's heat. Moreover, the kaminik were where a lynx frequently crouched in ambush, and the scent of the big-footed cat permeated these spots. Throughout early winter, snowfalls alternated with clear, calm weather. Each snowfall had a different meteorological origin and history, and thus each layer of the snow cover differed from all others in thickness and density. But such complexities did not now concern the voles, since their time was occupied with expanding their runway network and consolidating the scent-marked boundaries around the protected home areas in their home ranges. As the nights lengthened to their yearly maximums and the heat received from the sun dwindled to nearly zero, a huge dome of cold, dry air drifted eastward and pressed over the taiga. Heat flowed from the snow surface, the tree trunks, the needles, and the air itself to outer space. An aspen trunk cracked and split as it shrank. A spruce grouse plunged from a limb and dived into the snow below. Once below the surface, it swam several feet through the fluffy mass, and then wriggled and compacted a snug cave for itself. The wriggling collapsed the tunnel behind it, and the grouse was tucked into warm snow, surrounded by insulation. Here the grouse could rest throughout the long subarctic night, while the aspen buds in its crop were digested and released their calories of life heat. The voles continued their routine of living, several hours sleep in their nests. Well, I'm not going to have time to finish this chapter, so I will stop here, but that does give you a good taste of this amazing book. It's not fiction, obviously. It's nonfiction. It doesn't have particular individual characters, and yet, for me, the incredible detail of what is going on in the air, in the snow, in the earth, in the body of the vole, in the actions of the vole, and everything that they do to keep themselves alive. It brings the place so alive for me. It goes into so much detail about the taiga, the moose, the people, the lynx, the squirrels, even a tree that just falls from its moorings and travels downriver. Anyway, that's it. Cheers.